Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to our Bhagavad-gita Satsang. I'm Hari-kirtana, and it's a pleasure for me to be here with you, an honor to have you here with me. It is so nice to see so many of you here in real time once again. Welcome. And I trust, usually it's been the case, that you can hear me. And yet, I will demonstrate my lack of faith in this by asking you once again to raise your hands and let me know that this is in fact true. Thank you very much for reassuring me in spite of my lack of faith. Oh, good. I can be seen and I can be heard. Veronica, thank you very much. All right. Well, in that case, we have at least two sensory output and inputs verified. Let me come back to sharing the screen so that I can share our usual tidbits of additional information with all of you. You can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options probably up in the upper right-hand corner, although I trust that menu can move to wherever you want it. You need not worry about your microphone or video camera. You can see and hear me, but I cannot see or hear you unless you type something into the chat, as demonstrated just a moment ago. You can also pop a question or comment into the Q&A box if you would prefer to have it there. I will see it either way. Last class, we covered verses 64 through 66, the crescendo of the Bhagavad Gita and the crown jewel of transcendental knowledge. We'll take a quick look at those three verses again this evening as we move into our next big secret, which is, if it's such a big secret, then why am I telling you about it? I've just spent the better part of the last 2 years telling you a secret. And, you know, a secret is something you're not supposed to tell people. That's kind of the definition of a secret. And Krishna even says, of secret things I am silence. So I've been anything but silent about this. So we're going to talk about who should speak about this secret. Should I be talking to you about this? Why should one speak about this secret, if it's such a secret? And who should one speak about this secret to? That is to say, why am I telling you? And who should you tell when it's your turn to share the knowledge contained within the Bhagavad-gita? We will cover verses 67 through 71 this evening. But first, as always, our invocation mantra, and for those of you who are new to transliterated Sanskrit, a quick explanation about the diacritical marks, the pronunciation cues that you will see in addition to the rendition in the Roman alphabet. A dot over an M indicates that we close our lips and we close the back of our tongue to the back of the roof of our mouth at the same time. So we kind of wrap our mouth around a little walnut is what it feels like. A bar across a vowel, in this case an A, indicates an open and elongated version of that vowel as opposed to without the bar, meaning that the same vowel will have a shorter and more compact sound. And with that, I will chant this mantra, and if you like, you can chant it back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Translation: I offer my respects to the Supreme Person, the Son of Vasudeva, who is the all-pervading transcendence. And that son of Vasudeva is Vasudeva, which is another name for Krishna, the speaker of the Bhagavad-gita. Okay. We spoke last week about 5 levels of instruction in the Bhagavad-gita, general instructions. So the general instructions are just spiritual life 101 for ordinary folks who want to gain freedom from the conception of being the body. Or that is to say, the first piece of general information is we are not these material bodies. And one should, in view of this important piece of information, develop habits that help one gain freedom from attachment to all of those things that are associated with the body and reinforce this misidentification of the self with the not self. Then, one level up from that, we get secret instructions in Sanskrit, guhya, knowledge of Brahman, knowledge of spiritual substance, that everything is ultimately spiritual, that the material world itself is a transformation of spiritual energy. Then, more secret instructions in Sanskrit, guhyatar, meaning knowledge of the supersoul, knowledge that it's not just us in here, but rather that there is also the Supreme Person expanded into a localized form that accompanies every living entity and is found within every subatomic particle of matter and is therefore all-knowing, everywhere, all the time, and is accompanying us in our sojourn through this material world. Then the most secret instruction, guhyatam, is knowledge of Bhagavan, the personal form of the Supreme Being, with whom we can have an engagement, a relationship involving an engagement of devotional service. But the most secret of all secrets, sarva guhyatamam, is the revelation that we just covered, which is that the revelation itself of the possibility of this relationship is a product of Krishna's love for us. It's an invitation to engage in an intimate, personal relationship of love with the form of the Supreme Being that best facilitates that level of intimacy, beyond the power, beyond the majesty, beyond the omniscience of God. There is the person, and who has all of that ability and is therefore uniquely qualified to hold the position of the Supreme Person, the Supreme Being. And we're being invited to have a relationship with that person that is a loving exchange, a relationship of love. And this person's motivation for telling us this is love. So those 3 verses that we covered last week, one more time. Here, once more, my ultimate message, the greatest of all secrets, because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking for the sake of your well-being. So, sarva guhyatamam, the secret, but in addition, we have this in the Sanskrit, ishta asi, you are dear to me, dridham, emphasized, very dear, not just plain old regular dear, but super dear. Then the next verse, direct your mind toward me, become my devotee, offer your sacrifices to me, and act in reverence for me. Thus you will surely come to me. I promise you this, because you are so loved by me. So that last line is obviously super important. This is the revelation of the most secret of all secrets. But I want to come back to another line in this verse, offer your sacrifices to me. This is a little tidbit, or 1/4 of this set of instructions that will come back as we look at our verses for tonight. And then finally, the ultimate conclusion of the Bhagavad-gita, abandon all varieties of righteousness or dharma, and come to me alone for shelter. I shall free you from all misfortune. Do not fear, or have no fear. So here in the Sanskrit, the word sarvadharman, indicating all varieties of dharma. And here Krishna tells us that all varieties of dharma are subservient to this one ultimate dharma. Which brings us to this week's verses and a return to our usual format, which is I will read the English translation of each of the verses we'll cover this evening, then go back and we will look at each verse in detail and we'll chant a couple of them. So beginning with verse 67 of the 18th chapter. Here we see that Krishna has been speaking a secret that is hiding in plain sight. So we begin with 67. You should never speak of this to those who lack self-discipline, who are disinclined toward offering their devotion, who are disinterested in hearing or following these teachings, or those who are envious of me. '68. One who reveals this supreme secret of mine to those who are devoted to me engages in the greatest offering of love to me and will surely come to me. Text 69. No human being is as dear to me as one such as this, nor will there ever be anyone on earth whom I will love so dearly. Text 70. And I declare that anyone who studies this sacred conversation of ours concerning the principles of religion engages in loving worship of me by performing a sacrifice composed of knowledge. And 71. Even those who simply hear with faith, being free from envy, they too shall attain liberation and dwell in a world of abundance amongst those whose deeds are pure. All right, so now we'll go back and take a look at each one of these verses. So verse 67 again. You should never speak of this to those who lack self-discipline, who are disinclined toward offering their devotion, who are disinterested in hearing or following these teachings, or those who are envious of me. Why would Krishna say that you shouldn't repeat this secret to people who are like this? It's because they're not going to get it. They're not going to understand it. These are the qualifications for understanding the secret. And this is what makes it a secret hiding in plain sight. Because there are like 700 different editions of the Bhagavad-gita. So it's not like it's some secret society, some underground network of people trying to keep this information from getting out. The Bhagavad-gita has been around for thousands of years, hundreds of years, available outside of India. It's been, there are plenty of translations in many languages. But someone who does not have the kind of self-discipline to control their senses, who's just chasing after whatever the mind and senses are demanding. Not going to get it. Someone who is disinclined toward devotion, not going to get it. Disinterested in hearing? Well, I mean, that's kind of obvious, but also following these teachings. That is to say, you know, there are plenty of academic studies of the Bhagavad-gita that are kind of like people who go to a restaurant and memorize the menu but never order anything. And therefore they don't taste the teachings of the Bhagavad-gita, even though they may have memorized the menu, because they're not interested in actually following the instructions contained. And therefore, without action, there's no possibility of realization. It doesn't become an experiential kind of learning. Or those who are envious. It's not just a matter of people won't get it. It's a matter of it will be injurious to them to hear it, and especially injurious if they repeat it according to their misunderstanding. As the saying goes, knowledge is power, but how do you use that power? You know, a knife in the hand of a surgeon will save someone's life. The same knife in the hands of a murderer will take someone's life. So what you do with this knowledge, that is to say, your understanding of it, if you don't have a proper understanding of it, then not only will it not do you any good, but you run the risk of misleading others about what it means. Arjuna's qualification. Now remember, Arjuna is our role model for understanding the Bhagavad-gita. And back in the 4th chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna, today I am teaching you the ancient science of yoga. This transcendental mystery is being revealed to you because you are my devotee as well as my friend. So there's your first qualification, having a friendly attitude toward Krishna and also being devoted to Krishna. In the 9th chapter, Krishna begins that chapter by saying, my dear Arjuna, because you are not envious, I shall speak to you about the most confidential secret. And then he goes on to explain how it is theoretical knowledge realized as experiential wisdom, which is to say, if you do what I'm telling you to do here, you'll actually experience this, and it won't just be book knowledge. Envy, as we spoke about in an earlier class, is the Gita's equivalent of original sin. In the 7th chapter, Krishna speaks about this specifically, answering the question of, how did we get here? And he says, all beings enter this world in a state of delusion, bewildered by dualities that arise from desire and hostility, or envy. The problem is we would like to be God, we would like to control the world, make everything move into alignment with our desires, and we're envious, angry. We have animosity towards the person who actually holds the position. And because we can't have that position, we get the next best thing, which is the illusion that we can control the world. And the person who's actually in control disappears from our view. So in this condition, we have a misunderstanding about who Krishna is, even though Krishna clearly states in the Bhagavad-gita, throughout the Bhagavad-gita, who he is. People will think he might have been a historical personality, or he's a Hindu god, which in the West, that's another way of saying mythology. Somebody else's religion at best. And these are people who will not appreciate or consider the possibility that there's a person who has a very appropriate name, Krishna, meaning all attractive, very beautiful sound, who occupies the position of the Supreme Being. And people without the qualification to understand this will sometimes take up the profession of explaining Bhagavad-gita as a way to make money off of their own speculative ideas. I keep seeing something come up in my Facebook feed, somebody talking about some secret of the Bhagavad-gita, and I read it and it's nonsense, just total speculation. It has no basis in any understanding of the Gita as it actually is. In other words, what the verses actually say. And so my recommendation is avoid this kind of stuff that's all just mental speculation. Because the Gita's message is self-evident. The meanings of the verses are self-evident in most cases. There's no need to speculate on them. If we invent our own conception of what the Gita says, who Krishna is, who Arjuna is, what devotion means, then you're just not going to get it, because you're screwing an artificial interpretation out of a self-evident meaning. Now, the person who's not envious is one who is a devotee. That's almost the definition of someone who is a devotee of another person, is that I don't want to be you. I don't want to have what you have. I think you're wonderful. And I want you to be in the position you're in. To love someone means that you want them to be who and what they are. You want them to have what they have. Just goes with the territory of devotion. And therefore, you can get close to that person, and you have the opportunity to have a deeper understanding of that person from this position of devotion. If you have any questions about what I've said so far, please go ahead and pop them in the chat or in the Q&A box if you so desire. And I will move on to the next verse, which is 68. One who reveals this supreme secret of mine to those who are devoted to me engages in the greatest offering of love to me and will surely come to me. Now you know why I am teaching the Bhagavad-gita. Because this is the thing that Krishna thinks is the best thing to do. So I'm trying to do it. Now, it's entirely possible that since this class is available to a wide range of people, not everyone who comes across it will have all of the immediate qualifications that, for understanding that I've outlined thus far. Hold on to your hats, because I will speak a little bit more about that in just a moment. The people who approach Krishna, who are interested in Krishna, who want to hear about this science of self-realization, fall into several different categories. And Krishna described the different kinds of people that approach him in earlier chapters. One, those who are in distress, like Arjuna, for example, and like a lot of us. In fact, the more we know about the nature of the material world, then the more we realize that it is a place of distress. And the harder it gets to put that knowledge aside and go on as if everything's just great. And this is how spiritual realization will ruin your material life, because you can't unsee it. Once you understand what the material world is and you see it from a spiritual perspective, you can't unsee it very easily. You can if you try hard enough, but you come to the realization that we are all distressed. The nature of your distress becomes actually a little more clear, and the good news is you learn how to get to the root cause of the problem that is creating this distress. So the distressed approach Krishna. The curious also approach Krishna. One who desires wealth will approach Krishna, and one who is seeking after knowledge will approach Krishna. Of all of these, the one who has a genuine attraction for knowledge of the Supreme Person and the relationship between the self and the Supreme Person is particularly fortunate, and Krishna is particularly favorably disposed towards such person. But any of these different categories of people can and often do approach Krishna. So now the question becomes how to approach. That is to say, what's the best way for someone in any of these categories to get the most out of the Bhagavad-gita? And one of the very first things, which I've already alluded to, that is really, I think, key, is to understand who the two people are who are having this conversation, namely Krishna and Arjuna. Many times we hear a lot of speculation about the nature of who is Krishna and who is Arjuna. And in a lot of editions of the Gita, we will hear this idea that something impersonal is speaking through Krishna, that surrendering to Krishna is actually not what the Gita is telling us, but rather surrendering to the unborn, formless, nameless Brahman beyond Krishna is really our objective, even though actually the Bhagavad-gita doesn't say that anywhere. In fact, it says just the opposite. Krishna says that he is the foundation of the impersonal Brahman. Krishna tells us very directly who he is. In the 10th chapter, he says, I am the source of everything. Everything emanates from me. The origin of everything. And then he tells us what the consequence of understanding and accepting that piece of information is. Those who are wise, whose knowledge is perfect, serve me with devotion and worship me with all their heart. So there's a difference between understanding and accepting. We may understand something, and that may be the easy part. Accepting it and acting on the basis of that understanding, that can be the challenge. However, in the 5th chapter, Krishna tells us that peace is attained by knowing him to be the beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, everything that we do. That he's the supreme Lord of all the worlds and the most benevolent friend within the heart of all beings, which is to say that however difficult it may be to accept him in his position and act on that basis, he'll help. And he's like not somebody to be afraid of because he's our very dear friend. And Arjuna, oftentimes we hear that Arjuna is actually speaking to himself, that Krishna is Arjuna's higher self, meaning it's Arjuna, but it's just Arjuna speaking to himself. Which also is not supported anywhere in the Bhagavad-gita. There's no verse in the Bhagavad-gita that says that, nor is there any understanding within the tradition from which the Bhagavad-gita comes that supports this idea. Again, speculation. And it's easy to fall into this trap of mental speculation. You know, we want to think about, how do we understand it? How does our frame of reference get transposed onto this relationship between Krishna and Arjuna? And so I'll speak in just a minute a little bit more about how to avoid or resist the temptation to let our minds dictate the meaning rather than letting the meaning be self-evident. Which brings us to our next verse. And this time we're going to share the screen so that we can chant this verse. So this is verse number 69. I'll review the transliterated Sanskrit for everyone's benefit. A C is always a CH sound. So, and it's a CH sound from the center of one's mouth rather than from right behind one's teeth. So a K sound, you're going to bring your tongue back and curl it up into the middle of the roof of your mouth. Dot under an S is a regular SH sound, sh. And an accent mark over an S, however, is an SH sound sounded from all the way in the back of one's mouth. So you're going to curl your tongue all the way back as far as it'll go and make the sound more out of your jaw than from behind your teeth, as opposed to sh. Two T's together means that you're going to hit both T's. They won't merge together. So you hit the first T and then kind of hit the brakes and then proceed from the next T. A dot under an H at the end of a word, at the end of a line, indicates that a short version of the vowel that precedes that H is echoed back. An H after a vowel just means you're going to put some air, an H after a consonant just means you're going to put some air after that consonant. The dot under the H at the end of a word that is not at the end of the line simply means that there'll be a short stop on the vowel that precedes the H. And I think I have covered everything. So here we go. I will chant each line, and if you like, you can chant each line back. Na krachasman manushyeshu kashchin me priyakritamaha bhavitana chame tasmad anya priyataro bhuvi. Translation: no other human being is as dear to me as one such as this, nor will there ever be anyone on earth whom I will love so dearly. So here, Krishna is being pretty emphatic about this. The word priya appears twice. So priya, meaning dear. So priya-kritamaha, let's see, no, I didn't do that. Priya-kritamaha means more dear. And then priya-taro or taraha means dearer still. So Krishna is letting us know how much affection he has for someone who tells everyone this secret. Now, that's kind of unusual. Usually you get in trouble for sharing a secret. But here, Krishna is rather emphatically saying, no, I want this secret to be told. I just want it to be told to those who are qualified to hear it by virtue of their interest in engaging in a relationship with me. You know, don't go telling everybody who's not interested in having a relationship with me. Just tell the people who are. All right, any questions about any of this so far? Just let me know. And we'll go on to verse number 70. And forgive me for just a moment while I just double check something. Yes, okay. So we're going to chant this verse too, as I suspected. All the same rules apply. There's nothing new here except the tilde over an N. So if you look at the third line here, a tilde over an N is a nya sound. So you're going to make that sound about 2/3 of the way toward the back of your tongue against this same area in the roof of your mouth. And a J that precedes an N with a tilde is generally pronounced as a G sound rather than a J sound. So the combination with the N with the tilde changes the J. So instead of jnana, you get jnana. And there you have it. So I think we've covered actually all the transliteration, the diacritics in the transliteration. Once again, I will chant, and if you like, you can chant back. Adheshyate chaya imam dharmyam samvadam avyoyoho jnana jagyena tengaham ishtasyam iti me matihi. Translation. And I declare that anyone who studies this sacred conversation of ours concerning the principles of religion engages in loving worship of me by performing a sacrifice composed of knowledge. So this is a really far out verse. And here, Krishna is speaking of all of us who are engaged in the study of this sacred conversation. So the word dharmyam appears in this verse. So dharma, once again, making an appearance in the Bhagavad-gita. And it's really a very interesting word in this verse because it kind of has a double meaning. It tells us both that the conversation itself is sacred, or simply because of the subject matter and the people who are discussing it, it is a sacred conversation. But it also, at the same time, tells us what the contents of the conversation are. The contents, or the content of this conversation, is dharma, the universal principles of religion. So it is both, dharmyam here is both the defining characteristic of the conversation, it's sacred, and the primary topic of the conversation, that which is sacred. So here again, we find that there is no need to engage in any speculation as to what the Bhagavad-gita is about. Because Krishna says right here, we just had a conversation about Dharma. That tells you what you need to know about what the Bhagavad-gita is about. And here, Krishna has observed Muro's law. Muro's law is, tell him what you're going to tell him, then tell him what you told him. So in the very first verse of the Bhagavad-gita, we find that Dhritarashtra, the blind king, wants to know how everyone on the battlefield, on the field of righteousness, Dharmakshetra, responded to their destiny. What did they do? And Krishna describes a variety of ways that one can act according to their essential nature, which is another meaning of Dharma, how one can act in harmony with cosmic order, another meaning of Dharma, what the principles of religion are, the universal principles of religion, another meaning of Dharma, and the best way to respond to one's destiny, another definition of Dharma, and ultimately what is the highest Dharma that all other Dharmas are subservient to? Dharma. So in the first verse, the arrangement is that the Bhagavad Gita tells us what it's going to tell us about, then Krishna tells us about it, and then Krishna says, here's what I just told you, Dharma. There's also the idea that someone who studies this text engages in loving worship. That is to say, the study of the Bhagavad Gita is itself engaging in a relationship with Krishna. The word ishta, which has a couple of different meanings, when you put those two meanings together, you get this idea of loving worship. So just the study of the Bhagavad Gita itself is an act of devotion. At least that's how Krishna regards it. And he characterizes it as an act of sacrifice composed of knowledge, jnana, knowledge, yagyena, by the sacrifice. So by the sacrifice of knowledge, not meaning that you give up knowledge, that you sacrifice it like by throwing it into a fire or something, but rather by engaging one's intelligence, taking the time to engage your intelligence in trying to understand the message of the Bhagavad Gita, the message that Krishna is delivering to us. That is considered an act of devotion or loving worship. So here's how this works. Remember back in the 4th chapter, in the 24th verse, in that section of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is describing sacrifice. And in the process of that description, he describes that the instrument by which an offering is made, the act of offering, the offering itself, the one who makes the offering, the fire that consumes the offering are all of the same spiritual nature. And thus one who is absorbed in perfect meditation on such spiritual actions attains perfect spiritual consciousness. So in this case, the instrument by which the offering is made is the internet, Zoom, your computer, your digital device, however it is you're listening to this, and the message, the medium through which I'm delivering it. That instrument becomes spiritualized. This is how you spiritualize matter. Matter regains its original spiritual quality when it's engaged in spiritual activity. So we're turning the internet into a spiritual internet. Your digital device through which you are listening or watching this is becoming spiritualized. The act of offering, my speaking, your hearing, your questions, my responses. The offering itself, the subject matter, which in this case is already purely spiritual. The one who makes the offering, that's us. Me by speaking, you by hearing, offering your time and intelligence to try to understand the message of the Bhagavad-gita, and the fire that consumes the offering. In this case, it is the fire of our intelligence. All of that becomes spiritualized. Our intelligence becomes spiritualized when we engage our intelligence in trying to understand spiritual topics. Okay, so now how do you go about understanding spiritual topics? I spoke earlier about how what you don't want to do is engage in mental speculation. What we do want to do is engage in philosophical inquiry, and that's not the same thing as mental speculation. Mental speculation is making stuff up. You know, if you are speaking about the Gita, one thing to ask yourself as you speak is, where did I get this information? How do I know this is what the relationships are, what this means? Is it just a product of my own thinking about it? Or did I hear it from authoritative sources? Am I repeating my personal realization of what I have heard, as opposed to coming up with an original idea? I want to assure everyone that, at least I hope, you have not heard a single original idea from me in 107 hours of speaking about the Bhagavad Gita. I have given you my own personal understanding and realization, however meager it may be, but I haven't made anything up. Back in the same fourth chapter, later in that fourth chapter, Krishna explains to Arjuna how to understand the nature of the sacrifices that he has described. When he says, by approaching a spiritual master with humility, offering service, and making relevant inquiries, you can learn the truth about these sacrifices. They, the seers of the truth, will impart this knowledge unto you. So, by hearing, acting on what we hear, and then sharing in our own words our realization of what we have heard, we are then qualified to speak about the Bhagavad Gita, which is something that Krishna is encouraging us to do, because no one is more dear to him than someone who does this. Which brings us to our last verse, and I will keep my eye out for your questions and comments if you have any to share. Verse 71, even those who simply hear with faith, being free from envy, they too shall attain liberation and dwell in a world of abundance amongst those whose deeds are pure. So, simply by hearing, with an element of faith, and once again, this is just how important this is, that Krishna has emphasized this idea of being free from envy. So even in that situation, just hearing faithfully without envy, one can be freed from the reactions to their past actions. And if nothing else, be elevated to a position of material piety. That is to say, the mode of goodness. And people who are influenced by and operating in that mode of goodness, which, as we have discussed, is a platform for launching into the transcendental position. So this is why someone like me might give a class that's open to anyone. Anyone can come, even if there is no expectation that everyone meets all of these prior qualifications of being a devotee of Krishna and such like that. Not everyone is expected to have that particular qualification. But there are many who will approach such classes with faith and without envy. And as long as those two criteria are met, then the benefit is there. And as Krishna has said earlier in the Bhagavad-gita, even a little bit of advancement along this path can save one from the greatest fear. Simply by hearing, even if one does not aspire to the position of being a devotee, still there's an opportunity for liberation. So to get the most out of the Bhagavad-gita, Arjuna's qualification for hearing is our qualification for chanting, actually. There are 4 primary processes in the bhakti yoga or devotional yoga tradition. In Sanskrit, they are Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam. So the word Shravana refers to hearing, giving oral reception, AU, oral reception, to the descriptions of Krishna, and Krishna has given ample descriptions of himself here, and the instructions coming directly from Krishna. And after hearing such messages, after receiving them, then acting on them, and so that they become realized, internalized, memorized by virtue of your experience, and then you repeat them. That's kirtana. Is literally means glorification, and recitation and explanation of the teachings of Krishna count as kirtanam. Smaranam means trying to understand on an even deeper level. And padasevana means engaging oneself in service according to time and circumstance. So, for example, under the current time and circumstance, it may be the best way to give a class on the Bhagavad-gita is by doing it on the internet as an online class. So here is an example of how one would adapt an oral tradition to contemporary circumstances. And that takes us to the end of what we have this evening. So we covered why I'm telling you this big secret. Not only that, but we also spoke about who should speak about this secret, why one should speak about this secret, even though it's a secret, and who should one speak to about this secret, who is really qualified to hear it and make the most of it. Any questions about, or comments, or reflections on what we've spoken about this evening, insofar as when, where, to whom, and why we would want to speak about or hear about this secret? Annie saying it is all grace. Well, it is all grace, and it is also our qualification to receive that grace. If the wind is blowing and there's money blowing in the wind, then our qualification for getting that money is that we have to cover our body with glue and then go and stand in the wind with our arms out. And then the money will just stick to us. So grace is there for everyone, freely offered. The question is, what is one's qualification for actually experiencing that grace? And that is part of what we have spoken about this evening. If questions come up after the fact, Hari@harikirtan.com is where you can find me. And of course, I am always anxious to receive your questions and comments and realizations. Robert, is it possible for someone just read this chapter and, oh, we've got a cliffhanger. I'm sitting on the end, have the realization of truth? Yes. Is it possible for someone to just read this chapter? Well, your slow typing is keeping us on the edge of our seats. All right, so is it possible for someone to just read this chapter and then have the realization of the truth? Yes. That is a very intelligent person who simply by hearing understands that, yes, this is the truth. I'm hearing the truth, and I recognize it as such, and therefore I'm going to act on that basis. An intelligent person learns by hearing. Someone who needs a little extra help understanding something may need to see it. Someone else may need to learn by experience of what to do or what not to do, etc. But at least in the Vedic tradition, one who learns or understands immediately by hearing is considered to be someone of topmost intelligence. So yeah, no reason why not. If one hears this and recognizes it as the truth, then they're very fortunate. Or already elevated? Yes, you know, some people hear this and say, that's interesting, and go on their merry way. And then some people hear this and they think, tell me a little more. That sounds like it makes sense so far, but, and then they have questions. And then another person might say, this is what I've been waiting to hear my whole life. Keep going. They recognize immediately that this is what they were looking for. You know, Krishna's words in the Bhagavad-gita immediately resonate with those who are elevated and elevate the hearts of those who are receptive to them. They are by themselves purifying to the consciousness, and therefore one becomes elevated simply by hearing them. Annie, so we need to hear it with an open heart. Yeah, a mood of receptivity, which doesn't mean blind faith. It doesn't mean you don't question. It just means that you understand that what you are receiving is transcendental knowledge, and your questions are meant to help you deepen your understanding of it, rather than challenge it once you get past challenging. Because that may be your starting position. That was my starting position. I didn't accept the teachings of the Bhagavad-gita the first time I heard them. I thought it was nonsense. I didn't understand it the first time I read it. I rejected it once I did understand a little bit of it. And it wasn't until I engaged in the process of studying the Bhagavad-gita as the Bhagavad-gita recommends it be studied that I was able to get to the point of submissive reception. When I heard from someone who had seen and realized the truth and were therefore able to make an impact on me insofar as the truth of these teachings were concerned, then I got past my objections and actually started to learn. Veronica, what is the best way to study Bhagavad-gita? The best way to study Bhagavad-gita is with a teacher who is making a good faith effort to live in accordance with the teachings of Bhagavad-gita. That's the description that Krishna has given as those who have seen the truth, the Tattva-darshanis. The wise are those who are engaged in devotional service to Krishna, who have knowledge of sacrifice and can give direction as to how to understand and act on the basis. You can recognize such a person through the characteristics described by Krishna at the end of the 2nd chapter, and also in the 10th chapter. And elsewhere, Krishna describes that those who are in possession of this knowledge and can give it to others are constantly engaged in chanting this knowledge. They're constantly giving it away. And you want to seek out someone who therefore has experiential knowledge by virtue of living by the principles described by Krishna in the Bhagavad-gita. That is what worked for me, and I trust that that will actually work for almost anyone. I tried to read several Bhagavad-gita books, but none helped me to understand as much as when I hear a wise speaker. Yeah, there are, like I said, there are almost like 700 different editions of the Gita, many of them products of mental speculation that divert the reader from Krishna rather than direct the reader to Krishna. I suggest that since Krishna says that the qualification for hearing the Bhagavad-gita and understanding its message is to be my devotee, that you find an edition of the Bhagavad-gita that is written by a devotee of Krishna. And odds are you'll get a better understanding, at least from reading in that way, and then trying to hear explanations of the Gita's message from one who is similarly devoted will also be helpful. So I hope that helps. We are coming to the end. Oh, what? We've got more. You're very welcome, Veronica. Robert, can you further define mental speculation in this context, maybe with some examples? So mental speculation means that you use your own imagination to pull a meaning out of the text that's not there. So when Krishna says, surrender to me, but the commentator says, it doesn't really mean surrender to Krishna. It means that surrender to you, which we should surrender to that which is beyond Krishna or was within Krishna. That's an example of mental speculation. You're adding a commentary to the text that has no basis in the text itself. So the justification of an original idea through mental gymnastics and word jugglery that is not supported by the self-evident meaning of the text, that's mental speculation. As opposed to philosophical speculation, which is, here's the self-evident meaning of the text. Now, let me go deeper and deeper and deeper in order to understand everything that is in this text and what to do about it. That would be philosophical speculation as opposed to mental speculation. So I hope that helps. All right. Let me just move on to what's coming up. Next week, the grand finale of our classes on the Bhagavad-gita. We will look at Arjuna's position in the hero's journey, the classical journey that is illustrated by Joseph Campbell when he deals with mythology, but this can be applied to Arjuna and the Bhagavad-gita. So we'll see where he's at along the path of the hero's journey. Sanjaya's mind is blown. Sanjaya, you may recall, is the narrator of the Bhagavad-gita, and he will make a return at the end of the Bhagavad-gita to sum things up for Dhritarashtra, to whom he is relaying the teachings of the Bhagavad-gita as they are being spoken on the battlefield. And we will then hear the conclusion of the Bhagavad-gita as we cover verses 72 through 78, and special bonus. After 107 hours of teaching the Bhagavad-gita. I'm going to teach you the entire Bhagavad-gita in 4 minutes. I'm sure you'll be curious to see how I do that. Annie, you're very welcome. Robert, you are welcome. Glenna, you are also welcome. Veronica, you are welcome. It is my pleasure to share these teachings with you as best as I understand them from what I have heard from my teachers. It is always a delight to see you all here. Jill, you're very, very welcome. My pleasure. I am Lisa Marie. Thank you for being here. And you are also welcome. All of you that I see here and all of you that I know are there, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening or day, as the case may be. And I look forward to seeing you all next time. Emily, you're very welcome. Joelle, thank you so much. Oh, yes, please email me a question and I will look forward to hearing it. All right. Have a nice night.